Good morning, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Today is election day. Hopefully this is over quick because it's being talked about a lot. So we're going to not talk about election. We're going to talk about transportation costs and how it affects the supply chain and what are some of the strategies you can use to implement to try and offset some of these costs. So in prior videos, you heard me talk about conducting RFPs involving procurement and trying to craft a strategy when you're going out to the market to get some pricing. So let's take a look at each mode, for example. All right. So we have truck. Okay. And within truck, you have truckload and you have LTL. Okay. You have rail. Okay. You have ocean. You have air. And you have small parcel. Okay. Now, it's important, I can't write today, small parcel. It's important to understand that a lot of this, okay, is driven by supply and demand. And right now we're in 2024. So let's talk about the truckload market, okay? This market, you have simple supply and demand dynamics, right? So the market can be cyclical. You have rebalancing, you have demand, and then you start to come down where demand's decreasing, you have oversupply in the market, and then you basically are coming back around to where you're at the bottom of the market, essentially, where there's no freight, you're still trying to rebalance the market, okay? But when we're going out to bid on truckload lanes, okay, how can you try to make sure that you're going to get the best rate? You can't control the market. You can't control what fuel does, okay? Because that's another component that goes into your freight cost. But what you can do is you can provide good data. You can provide adequate lead time, okay? And I've talked about this a lot in my videos, and it's something I harp on a lot because it's a metric I study as it relates to the truckload side. Because what I found is if you're in a loose market and you're going to give 24-hour same-day notice, you might be able to find that you're going to get your contracted rate you have with your carrier. But if you're in a tight market where demand exceeds the supply, you're going to pay more for that truck. So again, we talk about here making sure you're giving historical data. You're giving lead time. And you're also trying to be a shipper of choice. And I talked about in my prior video where you have adequate loading times. You have a restroom for drivers. You allow drop trailers. Maybe you allow parking. You pay on time. All those things, okay? But again, these are the variables that you should try to focus on and control. So when these costs go up, you at least have some leverage. Because I can tell you, when COVID hit and freight rates went through the roof, you only have a couple choices. You can not pay those rates, and then your product doesn't get shipped. You can offer customers to pick up, okay, and let them handle the transportation. But by and large, right, you're going to have to come up with those types of solutions and ideas and have that communication with the customer. Or in some cases, you're going to have to go back and ask for increases on your product because freight rates have gone up. The same applies for LTL, okay? But with LTL, it's a little bit more of a niche market. For argument's sake, you might have, I'm going to say maybe 200 carriers versus thousands of truckload carriers out there, okay? Truckload's more fragmented. LTL, it's a little more segmented and more of a niche, right? But same thing. They're going to take their increase every year of, I'm going to say for argument's sake, let's say 2 to 6%. But how do you combat that? How do you counter that, right? You could look at certain strategies and say, I have a volume play. You could consider trying to shift all that volume to that carrier. You could look at maybe, and we used to do this back when I was at C.H. Robinson, customer-specific pricing. There is freight that LTL carriers desire. And if you have that kind of freight, you might be able to work with them to get a better rate, okay? Or get maybe not a 5% increase on your rates, maybe it's a 3% increase on your rates, okay? Same thing when we talked about the truckload. Do you allow them to drop trailers? How efficient can you make their operations and in turn? And something else I would tell you that you could consider, it's how you tender your shipments or provide information to your carriers, right? Are you using EDI? Are you calling them? Are you emailing them? Those are manual tasks that eat into their operating profitability, right? So some of the things that you want to consider. So let's move down to rail, okay? So rail, same thing. It's driven by supply and demand, all right? And what you see often is you have rail versus truck. And when I say truck, I'm talking full truckload. These two are always competing for volume, okay? And they typically will follow each other and jockey for that freight. But what you'll find is there's more flexibility with truck. Rail's a lot more rigid. But usually what you start to see when demand spikes, the capacity tightens, you're going to see those rates creep up. Now, rail, I would argue, is unless if you're shipping maybe a couple shipments a week, right? Or, maybe I'm going to say, let's say 3 to 5 shipments a week. That's a nice round number. You're probably going to see an increase. But if you're a larger shipper, and some of the chemical companies I've worked with, right, for example, they have the ability to give the rail so much volume that they could tie up a train, and then it becomes a unit train where they have a lot more leverage. So maybe, again, same thing, where it's instead of giving a big increase of maybe 6% on the line haul costs, maybe now it's only going to be 3.5%, right? Some of the things you can think about. Ocean. Now, what's interesting about ocean, right, is same thing. It's not like the truckload segment or truckload industry where you have so many carriers, right? When you think about the ocean carriers, no one's going out and starting an ocean shipping steamship line, right? You have a handful of them. They are, so again, the supply is low, the demand is high, and even when the demand drops, right, they will pull ships and do blank sailings. And so if you don't know what a blank sailing is, that just means they won't call on a certain port. So if there's not enough freight or containers at that port to pick up because it'll lose money doing that, they'll skip the port, okay? So with ocean, what I usually recommend to a lot of customers is if they're going to take their increases, it's one thing. If you're going to try and buy space on a steamship line and you're small, you're better off working with a freight forwarder or a non-vessel operating common carrier, 3PLs, okay? And you can pool your freight with other customers' freight, and that way you're benefiting from their volume, okay? Air, same thing. No one's going out and starting an airline. So again, you have so many airlines, you have so much cargo space. We know that that's, again, a supply and demand factor as well. So how are you able to offset some of those air costs? The reality is, if you're shipping air, you either have to pay those costs, you can also work with the freight forwarder, or you could then always switch to maybe ocean as well. Now, again, the trade-off's going to be, it's going to take longer to get there, but it's not going to be as expensive. And then small parcel, the reality here is too, you only have a few players. Now, there's more coming into the market, but when you think small parcel, right, you're thinking of the UPSs, you're thinking of the FedExes of the world, okay? And same thing, like they're going to have their peak season shipping charges, right? So if you are a customer and you're shipping during the holidays, right, they're going to take that increase because they know more people are pushing product out to meet holiday sales. So what can you do, right? You can shop it. You can play the two against each other. You can try and swing. And what a lot of shippers will do is they'll pretty much take all their small parcel and give it one to the other. And really what this comes down to is, can you negotiate with them, right? How do you offset? Maybe you look at some of their surcharges and negotiate structured surcharges. Maybe you try and eliminate some of those additional accessorials. For example, if you have customers that are looking for next day overnight, maybe instead of getting it to at 10 o'clock, maybe you say, can we get it to you at 12 o'clock? Bring those options to them because it'll make a difference in your cost, okay? I mean, in the end, the customer's going to pay for it, but by trying to give those options and reduce the cost, the customers appreciate that. So understand, it's like a seesaw with most of these transportation providers, right? And you have the carriers on one end and the customers on the other end. And really this seesaw, all of it depends on where we are in the economic cycle. If demand is high and supply is low, this scale tips in favor to the carriers. If demand is low and supply is high, it's going to tip the customers, and that's where you have that leverage. So you want to try and take advantage of that. But what I have found with all of these is if you can play the game of developing relationships with your transportation partners, if you are willing to give them data so they can see where you're shipping to, so they can look at their network and see where it makes sense to plug in their assets, it's going to make a difference, okay? If you're going to play the game of, I want to pay the cheapest price every day and switch carriers left and right, okay, that's fine. But in the long run, I've seen examples where if you can go out and contract lanes, okay, and let's just say a lane is $1,200, okay, they give you a rate of $1,200. That same lane on a given day is maybe 13, that's probably a little more. Let's say it's $1,250, okay? But because they've given you a volume commitment and you've given them data and you're consistent and you give proper lead time, they'll honor that $1,200, right? So you're saving yourself $50 and you multiply that by X number of lanes, that eventually will add up. So again, just some things to understand that the supply and demand dynamics in the transportation world, how the pricing works. Try to be a partner, try to provide data, try to come up with solutions so you can go back to your customers and give them options to show you're trying to reduce your cost, and that'll help in the long run. So don't forget to subscribe and like, guys. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.